This conference will now be recorded.
I will absolutely do that.
Isn't that scary to the county? Well, I'm phenomenal.
Are we ready to proceed? For the record, my name's Eric Burns, and for purposes of nominations, I will be presiding for a few moments. The first order of business is to call the roll, and I will now do so. Steve Clevenger.
Present.
Gary Schroeder.
Present.
Tom Andrew.
Present.
Robert Novak.
Present.
Michelle Dennis.
Present.
Dustin Grove. Dustin Grove. Ed Butz.
Present.
There is a quorum present, and I would like to open the nominations for president of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I move to nominate Steve Clevenger for president.
Is there a second? Are there any other nominations?
I move that nominations for president be closed.
Is there a second? I would entertain a motion to cast a unanimous ballot for Steve Clevenger for president.
I move to cast a unanimous ballot for Steve Clevenger for president.
Is there a second?
Second.
And if we may have a voice vote, all those in favor of Steve Clevenger for president with a unanimous ballot signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Mr. Clevenger,
Thank
seat
you.
is yours.
I will now take requests for nominations for office of vice president.
I move that Tom Andrew be nominated for vice president.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I move that nominations for vice president be closed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can I have a motion to cast a unanimous ballot for Tom Andrew as vice president?
I move to cast a unanimous ballot for Tom Andrew for vice president.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor to have Tom Andrew as our vice president signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I will now take requests for nominations for office of secretary.
I move that Eric Burns be nominated for secretary.
Second.
I move that nominations for secretary be closed.
Go ahead.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
I think we're supposed to take a
Yeah, I
vote
guess
on
we're
that.
supposed to do a voice vote on that. I'll take a voice vote on the closure of the nominations for secretary. Everyone signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nominations for secretary are closed.
I move to cast a unanimous ballot for Eric Burns for secretary.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of having Eric Burns as our secretary signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have a president, a vice president, and a secretary. Welcome, Tom, as our new vice president, and Eric as our secretary. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the December 7th, 2022 BZA public hearing as submitted.
A second.
Any comments or corrections? Hearing none, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business. Mr. Hiddle.
Thank you. We have before you tonight a discussion about proposed amendments to the Board of Zoning Appeals bylaws. The red line version of the amended bylaws starts on page 12 of your packet, and I'll just kind of summarize what's going on here for you. There's four areas that are proposed to be amended. The first has to do with the range of notification Right now, all of our petitions require that the petitioner mail a notification letter to adjoining neighbors or neighbors within 100 feet of the parcel, the subject parcel. We would be expanding that to those neighbors within 2 lots or 200 feet, whichever is greater of the subject parcel. So that's twice our notification requirement right now. It's still quite a bit less than is the standard around the state, but I think it's a good step in maybe a direction towards transparency and in favor of widespread notification. The on-site sign will still be required, as is the case now. It would also increase the time frame for notification from the current state minimum 10 days, meaning you have to mail out your notification letter and get your sign posted no less than 10 days before your hearing date. It would change that to 21 days. And again, that is actually kind of in the average range of what you see in other jurisdictions around the state. 10 days is pretty rare. That's the state minimum, and most jurisdictions have moved on to something greater than that. 21 days would be ours. You occasionally see a 14-day requirement. What you more often see is 21, 23, or 28 days. The third item is that we would be changing how we handle opposition and support letters. Right now, we read all of them into the record at the hearing, regardless of when they were received, and we are proposing not reading any of them into the hearing, but publishing them in the packet that gets published on the website and gets sent out to all interested parties a week in advance. We would publish any letter that is received, I believe, by noon of the day a week before the hearing, and any letter that is received after that time, but before the hearing, would be included in the file and available for the BZA members to read. That, I think, would take away the practice of reading 5, 7, 10 letters into the record, which really kind of loses its effectiveness after a while and lengthens the meetings, I think, longer than they need to be. And then finally, we're proposing a change to the voting procedure. As you know, with the BZA, the ballot voting, where you each write your findings of fact, personal findings of fact, one by one, can add, depending on the caseload, 40, 50, 60 minutes to the length of a hearing. And that's unusual in my experience. Most BZA ballots are pretty simple. And the one that we're proposing, this is the one you have now, where you each would answer each individual finding and then sign to grant or deny. And this is the one that we're proposing tonight. Thank you. And it would be a simple yes or no with the petitioner number, applicant, and hearing date filled out. With the yes, the fine print says, subject to any conditions, commitments, and written findings of fact as stated in the minutes of the board and incorporated herein and made a part of this decision. And that language is largely the language borrowed from this signature down here. That way, prior to the vote being taken, there will be a verbal recitation of the specific minutes that the vote is going to be subject to. I'm sorry, the specific findings, whether it's the petitioner's findings, the remonstrator's findings, or staff's findings. Eric just mentioned that he would like to see another line somewhere that would allow each of you as Board of Zoning Appeals members to make a distinct, specific individual remark if you would like to. If, for example, you don't feel that the submitted findings, the petitioner's findings, staff's findings, or anybody else's findings really capture your approach to the particular case, you could write in something individual and then sign it. And then this way, it's a matter of a minute to complete the balloting rather than 8, 9, 10, 12 minutes. So maybe let's come back to the balloting question last, having to do with the range of notification requirement, the timeline for notification, and the handling of opposition and support letters. Does anybody have any comments or questions? I'll also remark that these proposed changes largely mimic changes that were also brought to the Plan Commission and were vetted, and they approved them. And we want to do our best to keep the two bylaws, Plan Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals, as similar as possible. Any questions about those three particular components of the bylaws?
And maybe I'm not reading this correctly, David, but I was thinking at the Plan Commission, we did not have a roll call vote. We just voted on the yellow ballot.
We're talking about the other three provisions first, and then we're talking
Okay.
about the voting procedure after, I think is what.
Yeah, if we could. Yeah,
Maybe
I
I'm
think there
missing
probably will be more discussion about the balloting, so.
Right. I have no
Okay.
issues with the timing.
Okay.
I mean, especially since area plan, I mean, the ordinance committee went through those, and then area plan approved those, and they sound reasonable to me.
Okay? All right.
Any other comments about the first three issues? A lot of it's behind the scenes, what staff does, and how the petitioner and,
Yeah, the best part about the timeline lengthening is that, right now, we're pretty rushed by the time we get the petition to write the staff report, get it published. There's not much time for communication between staff and petitioner, between petitioner and concerned parties. So you often see people come to the hearing not really aware of what's being requested, having lots of questions that they could have had answered by the petitioner or by staff in the intervening time. So we think this will be really helpful. Okay, so questions about the ballot. Gary, what was you had a question?
Sorry if I was on the wrong one. And I'm on page 14, and maybe I'm misunderstanding that on the voting. Typically, we just vote on either the yellow ballot or the written ballot, and there's no voice ballot. Are we changing that to where we're going to have a voice ballot? What did we do at the Plan Commission, Eric?
I don't think there was,
I don't think we addressed it.
I don't think there was any change from the Plan Commission.
Okay, still just a plain yellow ballot. So are we still doing the same thing here then? No voice vote on the petition, and it's just a ballot?
Yeah, I believe as we have it written, the ballot would be filled out and then collected, and then the attorney, board president or attorney shall summarize verbally the vote.
By roll call. That's what confused me, where it says, vote verbally by roll call. What does that mean?
What do you think about that, Eric?
Well, I think as long as you have the written findings, we're fine. And that's the important ingredient. And the reason that there's ever been a challenge is because there weren't sufficient written findings. And if we get the ballot, and I think it does need a little bit of adjustment. I like it because it's very straightforward, clean, easy to understand. And once we get this correct, that's all you really need. You need a written ballot, and it doesn't have to have a voice vote. And so there's no requirement of a voice vote. The requirement under the statute is a written findings of fact, which is what this ballot is.
Okay, well, I think what is proposed here, if I'm reading it
It is.
correctly, it says board members shall
Yeah.
vote verbally by roll call.
And I agree that's what it's calling for. Whether or not that's what you want is the question.
Well, I don't think we did that at the Plan Commission. I think we removed that.
No, I mean, it didn't come up at the Plan Commission because you don't
Okay.
have the complicated ballots that
Got
we
it.
have.
So
But it,
for discussion, I'll move that
Okay.
we remove the words, board members shall vote verbally by roll call.
And that's completely
right.
legal.
Do we have
reasons for
do we have a
that.
second
Because
for that?
everybody's
so we can
on
bring
record
that-
Yeah.
with a signature.
Do we have a second on that so that we can discuss that
Discuss
further?
it. It's the reason I just want to.
Second. I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank
We
you.
actually, multiple seconds. I mean, I think if we simplify the ballot, I don't think there's any reason to do a roll call vote.
That's my
I
point,
guess
yeah.
is my point.
Okay.
That, I do have a question. It does say petition number. I'm assuming that the petition number, if we have multiple variances, for instance, it'll have like a -1.
Right. You
And it
would still
might-
need to, the bylaws require a separate vote on each variance component. So my thought was you could have, V-2042A, V-2042B.
Or however it's labeled on the agenda.
Yes, yeah,
So I think it's,
Yeah.
right now, it's, 1 and 2.
yeah.
Are these going to be filled out for us, or are we going to fill these out? I mean, are they going to be blank, and we just fill them out as we go, so we get receive blank ballots?
I think currently we're filling them out, and I think that's probably a good practice to continue. You know, changes can be made in terms of the vote. You can split a variance into even more votes at the hearing if you make that decision. And with that, we'd have to kind of fudge some blank ballots, but I think we could do that.
We'd
So,
have to do that now anyway.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll have these filled out and ready to go.
If you have them filled out and ready to go, it might be nice to, you actually have like the petitioner's name and you know, what that actually is. I don't know if you want that on there so that we don't get confused if they're out of order for some reason.
Right. I see what you're saying. We could do
So,
that.
so if you have, and I think on the, like the variances, I don't think we have one with multiple variances, but it would often say, yeah, like this one says side setback variance, so that we know which variance we're actually voting on rather than by numbers, so that we don't actually get, we don't get confused, because I know that.
That's good.
I know that has happened before in the past.
Just to complete this,
Go ahead.
I would amend my motion to make this wording correctly, and I would move that the sentence near the bottom of page 14 be removed. The board members shall vote verbally by roll call, and the board president or attorney shall summarize the vote. That needs to be removed. And if we go to the next sentence, it says, board members shall then complete the written ballots, and I think the verbiage after that needs to be removed and replaced with the sentence that's above, meaning remove, and the attorney shall verify the agreement between the verbal and written votes, and be replaced with the board president or the attorney shall summarize the vote. If that seems correct.
Usually it's
Mr.
the
Burns.
attorney that summarizes the vote, and I often will repeat whether or not it's been granted or denied.
So do we need a second on my amended?
Let's go ahead and have a second on it.
Okay.
Tom, since you,
Second. Second.
any discussion on that or any comments from staff?
The staff, the findings, the reports, when we're talking about that, will still be in here. I'm assuming it won't say regarding the ballot items, but it'll go through, the use variance was met.
Yeah,
still
we'll
that
have, the
to-
staff findings will be in the packet, as will the petitioner's findings.
And we'll see you guys approved or denied.
Yes,
Like- okay.
yeah.
Can we vote on that motion, Steve, before we get
Yeah,
off
let's
track?
go ahead. Any last comments on that motion, that this is Gary's motion, or as amended, to remove that one sentence and to modify the other based on the ballot? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Now we can get on with the rest of the motion, or the discussion.
Well, I think that's it. We can come back next month with the ballot incorporating Eric's idea.
Okay, so you don't want to go proceed with the first three, and then, or actually, I guess we could do them all, and then it's a matter of then approving the ballot when
Okay.
it comes forward.
That would work, too.
I guess we really never had a main motion for that, so.
We just amended the
The printed
Okay.
word, yeah.
So what do you want, a motion to approve the amendments to the bylaws as submitted and edited, or
As amended and
amended, thank
amended,
you.
yeah.
Yes, please.
Second or motion?
I made the motion.
Second.
To
That
approve those.
motion.
Okay, seconded. I have another question, Steve.
Sure.
And that goes back, and maybe it's in here and I missed it, had to do with advertising in 2 newspapers. I think it was edited to say the locals that also apply in this particular case, or is those under different bylaws?
Yeah,
That should be in here.
we crossed out Lafayette Leader because it's no longer with us.
Right, okay, so that's been,
somewhere.
okay,
At the bottom of page 15.
okay, so we did address that. Great, thank you.
I'll note for the record that if you're approving this today, I think we would want to put it in place March 1st to give us a little bit of time.
Or for the March meeting.
Well, yeah, it's for applications that are coming in. I think we need to give a little bit of
Okay.
lead time so people understand that the timeline is changing, the calendar is changing, we need to change our forms. So I would think if the amended bylaws would then be put into effect March 1st, 2023.
I'll make
Do I
a
hear you?
motion to that. So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to make that change, so it's applicable March 1st, 2023. Any other comments about the bylaw changes?
Just need a vote on the March 1st.
Oh, all in favor of making them effective March 1st?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Did we vote on actually?
No, we haven't actually voted on that. Any last comments before I? Okay, all in favor of adopting the bylaws as recommended and amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So effective
March.
1st of March. And I'd like to read our procedures for our meeting. Thank you for putting up with our business there. I'll go ahead and take the public hearing motion.
I move that there be incorporated into the public hearing portion of each application be heard this evening and to become part of the evidence at such hearing, the unified zoning ordinance, the unified subdivision ordinance, the comprehensive plan, the bylaws of the area plan, the bylaws of the Area Board of Zoning Appeals, the application and all documents filed therewith, the staff report and recommendations on the application be heard this evening, and responses from checkpoint agencies.
A second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our procedures for this evening's meeting. Each case will be heard following a motion and a second from the board. We will ask the staff to report on its findings. Following the staff report, we will ask the petitioner to present his or her case, after which anyone wishing to support the petitioner's request for a variance or special exception will be asked to come forward. After hearing from the petitioner and those speaking on his or her behalf, we will ask those speaking against the petition to present their arguments. The petitioner will then be allowed to rebut arguments raised by those in opposition to his or her petition. Following the rebuttal, the board may wish to ask questions of the petitioner, supporters, and opponents of the petition or of the staff. The staff will have the opportunity at this time to make any necessary clarifying comments. We will then vote by use of a prescribed ballot. 4 votes are necessary to make any decision. In the absence of 4 votes, either for or against, the petition is automatically continued to the next meeting. Please observe the following guidelines for the sake of time and fairness to all. State your name and address for the record before you speak. Limit your remarks to 5 minutes or less. Do not repeat arguments that have been brought up by others. Remember that all visual aids used to support your argument will remain the property of the board. Cell phones must be turned off while the meeting is in session. Please step out of the room before using your cell phone. And do we have a sign-in sheet for today's meeting? If you are speaking, if you're not the petitioner and are speaking in favor or against, please sign on the sheet on the staff desk for that case so that we have your name and address. But you still need to say it when you come up to the mic. With that in mind, we will take the first case.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2090 CSG Realty LLC. Petitioners requesting a special exception to allow a transient guest house operating 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, for a maximum of 6 guests at 348 Overlook Drive, east of Soldiers Home Road and Ravinami Addition, just outside of West Lafayette. That's in Wabash 5 Southeast 23-4, with conditions. And that was continued from the December 2022 ABZA hearing by an inconclusive vote.
A second.
Have a motion and a second, and we'll hear from staff, please.
Thank you. So yes, this case was heard last month, so I won't repeat everything. I'll just give you a refresher here. The petitioner is requesting a special exception for a transient guest house, which is a defined term in our UZO. This is a type of Airbnb, to use the common term, where the owner is not present while it is in use by renters, short-term rentals. This house is outside of the city limits of West Lafayette in the Ravenemy neighborhood. According to the petitioners, they would have a maximum number of guests capped at 6. It's a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath house. With the length and width of the driveway, as well as the 2-car attached garage, staff believes that it has sufficient space for parking for the number of guests that they are limiting themselves to. Staff believes that this property will be used in a way that is very similar to other single-family homes in R1 zones. Last month, we did read 7 letters, and there was 1 petition signed by 44 people. This month, we do have 5 new letters to read whenever you guys are ready. And I'll quickly go through the slides here. You see the zoning. There's the aerial, a little bit more zoomed in. It is a heavily wooded area. Here's the site plan. The front of the house and the approach. I believe that's all we have. Yes. So I am ready to read the letters whenever you're ready. Staff is recommending approval of this special exception.
Are the letters for or against? Or
Against.
Against? We'll wait till after those in favor have spoken.
Thank you.
Petitioner, his or her representative.
Colin Gifford, 348 Overlook Drive. Hello, and thank you for your time this evening and hearing this case again. I'll try to go through this quickly. It looks like we have a pretty full agenda today to respect your guys' time. My wife and I are both mechanical engineers. I myself graduated from Purdue. I'm really excited about rejoining the West Lafayette and Purdue community. My wife and I are big sports fans, and this house provides us an opportunity for us and our family to enjoy many Purdue sporting events for football and basketball games and other events that Purdue hosts. When we are not able to use the home ourselves, we're hoping to have the ability to host guests through Airbnb on a short-term basis. This ability will help us offset some of the costs associated with owning the home for our use. We've been spending a lot of time at the home, investing in it and fixing it up to be something that we are proud of for our family. And we have had the opportunity to meet many of the neighbors. We respect our neighbors, and we've tried to connect with many of them. We've had some positive interactions and comments, but also have heard concerns as we did in the December meeting. So I'd like to reiterate our response to those concerns here today. There is concern that the house will create noise, road traffic, and generally be a nuisance or disruption to the neighborhood. This is not our intention and certainly not our expectation. We have plenty of measures in place to help prevent these issues. As I mentioned, we will be utilizing Airbnb to host guests, and this platform will allow us to screen guests prior to booking, only accepting guests that we deem acceptable. We have policies in place that will be rules for our Airbnb, which would include no parties, no pets, noise monitoring, 2-night minimum stay, maximum occupancy limit of 6. And when guests would book this, they would be required to agree to these policies. We'll have engineering controls in place, in addition to that, which would be our smart doorbell, which would help us monitor the occupancy limit, as well as a noise device that will measure decibel levels so we can ensure that we're not disrupting our neighbors. This, as Amanda said, this house has a 2-car garage and a long driveway that we feel will be plenty of space for parking that would not hinder any access to the street. We do not anticipate any issues. As I mentioned, we do have a team of local contractors that can fix any problems that arise. Additionally, we do have a local manager that's 3 miles away. If something comes up, would be able to help out as well. We are in Brownsburg, which is not far, if anything else came up as well. That is all I have. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? If not, we'll take the letters in opposition, please. And a reminder, if you do submit a letter, that you are not allowed to speak.
To the zoning committee, like all of my other neighbors in Riverview.
Are you on?
I'm not. Thank you. To the zoning committee, like all of my other neighbors in Ravinnimi, I am speaking against the special exception with specific reference to the rebuttal the petitioners made. I and my family live at 119 Valley View Court, West Lafayette, Indiana 47906. We are across the way from 348 Overlook Drive. They claim that they wish to be a part of our community. I have no idea whether this is ultimately true or not. My question, though, is this. If they really wanted to join our neighborhood and be a part of our community, why are they persisting in a course of action that no one in the neighborhood wants and that, in fact, that we all vociferously oppose? If they love Ravinnimi so much, why didn't they ask questions before buying? My husband and I briefly considered buying a property in an area we are interested in for retirement. For us, this is still about 15 years away, so we would have needed to rent out the property in the meanwhile, and we considered doing so as an Airbnb. For various reasons, we changed our plans. But I will say this, had we gone through and bought the property only to discover that the residents did not want us to use it in this way, we would have altered our plans, especially assuming the community was one we wanted to join. We would therefore have wanted to build good relations with the current residents, parentheses, and frankly, we would have asked around before to see what our possible neighbors thought, and we would have respected that, end parentheses. It is therefore very hard for me to take the petitioner's claim in good faith, given that they do not seem to take seriously or care about our many objections to their plan. They offer so-called solutions, but none of what they say ultimately addresses any of our concerns. They say they want to be a part of our community, but they are flouting the very things we stand for. I and my neighbors remain extremely opposed to granting the special exemption. The petitioners should have, at the least, showed good faith efforts to work with the neighborhood. Continually making their own arguments about why our concerns don't matter does not constitute a good faith effort. By contrast, it strikes me as both selfish and ultimately unconcerned with the well-being of the neighborhood. Sincerely, Robin A. Bartlett.
To members of the Area Board of Zoning Appeals from Jane M. Kirkpatrick, I would like to respectfully request that the APC deny the special exception request made by CSG Realty LLC for a transient guest house operating 24 hours per day, 7 days per week for a maximum of 6 guests at 348 Overlook Drive. I believe that this special exception would materially and permanently injure other property or uses in the same district and vicinity for the following reasons. 1, it creates a business in our neighborhood. An LLC, by nature, is a business. The individuals running this LLC stated, as per the minutes of the ABZA December 7, 2022, they purchased this property with the idea of having a place for themselves to stay for local events. They clearly plan to generate revenue from the property to finance this venture by renting the home multiple times throughout the year in the fashion of an Airbnb for short-term occupancy. Number 2, alters the environment in the neighborhood. Even with criteria for renters listed on a website and with a contract, it is well established that the criteria required can be ignored by short-term renters, creating unwelcome challenges to the neighbors who are then in the position to have to issue complaints and communicate problems. In my opinion, it would be much preferable to have long-term renters who become a part of the neighborhood as compared to transient renters revolving through the neighborhood. Number 3, creates safety issues in regards to traffic. I strenuously disagree with the statement by APC staff, Amanda Esposito, in the December 7, 2022 minutes. The traffic generated due to this use would be no different than other homes and uses in this neighborhood because the house will be rented at any given time to a maximum of 6 guests. The garage and driveway provide 10 spaces, which is ample parking for the use. There is not one home in the neighborhood that approaches having over 4 or up to 10 cars associated with their property. During episodes where multiple individuals are renting this property, there would be a larger than typical number of cars entering and exiting the neighborhood. Because the neighborhood has a single entrance, there is no through traffic, making it a popular neighborhood for walkers and bikers. This increase in traffic by individuals unfamiliar with the lack of lighting at night, the narrowness of the roads, lack of sidewalks, and the curves that can hide pedestrian traffic puts our children and elderly walkers at greater risk. My husband and I specifically chose this neighborhood in 2001 for its location, quiet streets, and family-oriented nature. The Ravinneby neighborhood is a closely knit group of welcoming neighbors who look out for one another. The mix of young children and elderly in the neighborhood is special. The children ride their bikes and scooters in the summer and walk to and from the bus stop at the top of Overlook Hill each day during the school year. Our neighbors watch out for one another and are aware of unique needs of neighbors, such as Mrs. Wright, who is in her 90s and lives directly across the street from 348 Overlook Drive. She is legally blind, yet enjoys being out of doors to take walks. Revolving groups of short-term renters will not be aware of these issues. I am very opposed to allowing an LLC to open a business that allows transient rental occupants in a residential property. The awarding of this request, while for only one property, sets a precedence. There are a number of homes in this older neighborhood that will be coming on the market needing updates. These homes will likely sell for lower market prices due to the upgrades needed. When potential buyers looking for bargain prices see there has been permission granted to allow them to create a short-term rental business, the integrity of this highly desirable intergenerational family neighborhood will be compromised. In summary, the APC can act to protect homeowners in this neighborhood by denying this request. Jane Kirkpatrick.
My name is Melinda Holmberg, and I live at 330 Overlook Drive. My home is one house away from 348 Overlook Drive, but more importantly, I live at the intersection of Valley View and Overlook Drive. It is the first cross street after 348 Overlook Drive. I have an 11-year-old son who uses Overlook Drive to ride his bicycle, walk to school, walk to his grandparents' house, and he loves to walk around the neighborhood and look at stuff. I am sure in the next few years he will be driving on Overlook Drive. I am extremely concerned about the increased and type of traffic on Overlook Drive. I am especially concerned about the blind curve that hides our entrance onto Overlook Drive to the left or east toward 348 Overlook Drive from any oncoming traffic. This is a very dangerous intersection, and everyone must be very careful as they approach or enter this intersection. The residents of our addition take great care to be safe no matter whether they are driving on Valley View Drive or Overlook Drive. I fear for my son's safety as he lives here for at least the next 7 years from being hit and killed or injured by cars driven from guests at the CSG Realty Mini Hotel. There will be at least 100 Purdue football games, basketball games, and other events from now until the time my son turns 18. There will be guests from the CSG Realty Mini Hotel who will drink, party, drive at all hours of the day and night, sometimes on a Tuesday, sometimes on a Saturday, sometimes who knows when. This is not normal behavior displayed by my own neighbors. In fact, it is abnormal in my neighborhood to have unfamiliar guests driving and be unaware of my son's presence on the narrow, blinded, unlit roads that are outside my front door. I would ask the CSG owners if they would want their grandmother, their mother, or their school-aged children to take on the additional risk. My guess, and those of my many neighbors here tonight, would be no. No, we want residents, not non-owner-occupied CSG Realty transient visitors in Ravinneby. Tippecanoe County Appeals Zoning Board, you must turn this request down for the sake of my son and others who are here to say that an unoccupied Airbnb will have more impact on Ravinneby residents than an established resident. 2 more. My name is Sharon Holmberg, and I live at 315 Overlook Drive. I am concerned that the approval of this Airbnb will make the neighborhood less safe to crime and vandalism. I believe the transient residents of the CSG Realty Company make me feel personally unsafe and afraid. Approval of this non-owner-occupied CSR Realty house will result in non-residents and their friends arriving and departing at the house at any time, day or night. Is CSRG Realty screening everyone who will attend parties and events? Ravinneby is a welcoming neighborhood to those who choose to live here, all caps. We have no crime in our neighborhood. There have not been any police calls in the neighborhood that I know of in the past 15 years. We have not had any thefts or vandalism that I know about. Approval will result in strangers of all age groups who will be here one day and gone forever the next day. The CSG Realty owners will be in Brownsburg during the non-resident rental. They will not be present to control and monitor the guests, just like a real homeowner would do. Older, widowed, and residents who live alone are intimidated by this transformation. This would be a huge change and one that is not acceptable for me and my neighbors. I chose my house, this street, this neighborhood because it is safe. There is no noise, there is no traffic, no crime, no vandalism, and no personal threats. If I wanted any of that, I would move to where this Airbnb must go. It can go to an area in West Lafayette that is already approved for Airbnb. It is not acceptable to approve Revenemy for Airbnb when there are already more than adequate Airbnbs currently existing in West Lafayette with zoning approved for many, many more. Do we need an Airbnb in Revenemy? I don't think so. Signed, Sharon Holmberg. My name is Kevin Holmberg. I live at 330 Overlook Drive. I live one house away from 348 Overlook Drive. To me, it is common sense for the zoning board to reject this application for a non-owner occupied business that is trying to transform our neighborhood. CSG Realty selected this property because it is close to Purdue and was available at a very reasonable price. Their petition and their letter written to the residents even says the Airbnb will benefit from the amazing and cozy neighborhood community. I am sure it will say that in their online advertisement. This non-owner occupied Airbnb belongs in West Lafayette that are close to Purdue events. There you can party to your heart's content and walk home. You can make noise and bother your student neighbors who don't care. You can park in the street. You can bring your RV or school bus. You can party in the backyard or the front yard. You won't harm the school-aged children or the elderly. We live here. CSG Realty does not. We love our neighborhood and we love it. Commissioner Tracy Brown for District 1 was elected by a large majority vote of 58% in November. He campaigned and his website page says, quote, I am wired for public service. It's all I know. Service to others is important to me. That's not just in my life as a county commissioner, but it's about being involved in the community, end quote. Your community of Revenemy in District 1 is speaking loud and clear. It is common sense. We do not want a non-resident company, CSG Realty, a non-voting entity, a business adventure from Brownsburg, to significantly impact the way of life in Revenemy. Signed, Kevin Holmberg.
Thank you. I'll now take those wishing to speak in opposition to the petition. And please remember, before or after you speak, to please sign the sign-in sheet.
I will be brief. My name's Carolyn Persifield. I live at 400 Overlook Drive. I'm the last house in the addition. Just very briefly, I think one of the issues that we're struggling with is when you are living, resident in the neighborhood, we respect not just our own property and our own families, but the property and families of everybody who's in the neighborhood. So I think one of the things that really concerns us, and this is just human nature, we optimize for one, right? And so parking is an example, and by the way, that is not as big as it looks in the picture. I'm just going to say. And, when their parking is an issue in our neighborhood for people who come visit or who do service. And they often will drive onto the edge to avoid somebody who's walking or another car coming and inadvertently go into their yard. We don't do that because we want to respect our neighbors' properties. And noise, I've never heard a loud party in the whole neighborhood. It's not that we don't have parties, but we would never knowingly allow anybody to go out of scale on that. So I think the matter of human nature, optimizing for one, when the Realtor open house was done here, there were 2 or 3 cars in the driveway, but nobody wants to park where they're going to get blocked in. So all of the others parked as close as they could, and they were right on this on the sides of the driveway and across the street in front of that one, we could hardly, as residents, move through there worrying about whether we were going to hit those cars that were parked there. So I just think it's human nature and respect, and, you know, video surveillance and things like that isn't going to fix human nature, especially when they aren't there to sort of curate it themselves. So with that said, I did want to introduce my neighbors. I'm in opposition to having this request approved, and I'd like my neighbors who agree in opposition to just briefly stand up. You don't have to say anything. And pointing out that our neighborhood only has 48 houses. So this is a fairly high percentage who are here and who have written letters. With that, I will end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
My name is Margaret Rowe, and I live at 342 Overlook Drive. And before making my remarks, I want to turn publicly and thank Amanda Esposito for her help and her kindness and her patience with me and others. Thank you, Amanda. At the end of the December 7th BZA hearing, the representative of CSG Realty mentioned 124 Westwood and suggested that is in the same category as 348 Overlook would be if you granted the special exception. Not true. The house on Westwood has a, quote, transient guest room, unquote, with an owner, quote, present in the dwelling unit when the transient guest rooms are occupied by renters, unquote. Excuse me. 348 Overlook is in a class by itself, which is why we're meeting a second time. 348 requires a special exception, what a layperson might term a rupture of code, to become a transient guest home, what a layperson might term a mini hotel. In granting the special exception, the Board of Zoning Appeals would be creating a first for Ravinimi, a first that might easily lead to other special exceptions that would destroy the integrity of Ravinimi, turning an R1 community into what could become a mini hotel district. The APC staff report of July 13, 2017, captures the anxiety we feel about a, quote, transient guest house, unquote. I'm now quoting from that staff report. The transient guest house appears to be the type of short-term rental that neighborhoods as well as city government object to the most. The fear is that too many guest houses in a single neighborhood could have a detrimental effect on that neighborhood. It would mean houses possibly sitting empty for long periods of time, or the other extreme with loud parties and no one present to be held accountable. Other localities have found that people buying houses specifically for guest houses can increase the cost of houses and price out other buyers interested in living in the neighborhood, unquote. That APC report captures much of the fear that we in Ravinimi feel about BZA 2090. We fear, quote, no one present to be held accountable, unquote. I think of a phone call I got 2 weeks ago from my own lawyer who had been called by the nuisance abatement squad in Indy to track a client of his who owned an Airbnb for which there had been noise complaints, gunfire. Something like that is of real concern to us. The report also captures our interest in having real, present neighbors rather than magic doorbells, engineering controls, and the like. We want people, quote, interested in living in the neighborhood, unquote. We ask you to protect the R1 identity of Ravinimi by denying the special exception for 348 Overlook Drive. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Speaking in opposition.
Is this the mouse? Okay. Can we go back to the first one, please? Can we go back to the first one, please? Good. Okay, right click or left click?
Let me go out to the first one for you.
Okay, my name is Alan Holmberg, and I live at 315 Overlook Drive. I'm going to be presenting photos today to help you understand our neighborhood and some of our concerns. I'm also going to share the impact of CSG Realty Company and their transient renters on our neighbors. So how do you advance it? Can you advance it then? Ravenna is a small neighborhood. It's reached exclusively by a single entrance and exit. Next slide, please. This is the road that goes from Soldiers Home Road into our neighborhood. It's a long and narrow drive, and it virtually eliminates any traffic into our neighborhood. Other than residents, we only see a few service vehicles in our neighborhood. Next slide. We have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit that is posted immediately upon coming into our neighborhood. Next slide. This is a photo of our neighborhood. As someone said, we have about 45 homes that were constructed during the 1950s and 1960s. Our primary road going through the center is Overlook Drive, where 348 is located. Our neighborhood is very welcoming. We embrace those who move into our neighborhood each year. We are opposed to a non-owner occupied realty company that wants to transform the neighborhood we love and enjoy. The words of CSG Realty have stated that we are an amazing and cozy community, so they recognize that. Next slide, please. The neighborhood includes older citizens like Gladys Wright. Gladys is 97 years old. She lives directly across from the CSG Transient Hotel, directly across the street. Gladys is widowed, legally blind, hard of hearing, but routinely walks her dog down Overlook Drive. She is afraid and scared that the renters at the unoccupied Airbnb directly across from her will interfere with her personal safety. The house adjacent to 348, the corner of Overlook and Valley View, belongs to a widow who lives alone and walks her dog multiple times on Overlook Drive a day. On the other side of 348 lives a dedicated runner who runs all hours of day and night. Previously, she was almost hit and injured by a car leaving the 348 driveway. The car did not see her, even though she wears bright clothing. This was almost a tragic event in our own neighborhood. Next slide, please. There are school children in our neighborhood. The families in our neighborhood are familiar with who rides the school buses. Next slide, please. The school buses come to the front of our neighborhood, and the children must walk to the school bus. Next slide. They must walk down the center of Overlook Drive because we don't have any sidewalks in Overlook and our Ravenna. Everyone in our neighborhood knows that the school children have to walk down the center of the drive. Next slide. This is a slide taken in front of 348 Overlook. This white car is parked directly in front of 348 Overlook. There's only enough room for two cars to pass each other. There's no room for a person on the roadway. There's no sidewalks. Cars have to slow down or stop for the pedestrians. Everyone in our neighborhood knows that. Next slide. This is a picture of sticks. If you take a look in the left-hand side, there's sticks that are in the yard showing that people don't want people to drive on their yard because the roads are so narrow. Next slide. There's another slide besides this. This is the first one. This is 348 Overlook. recently, within the last week, there are 2 service trucks in the driveway and a personal vehicle. You can see that the driveway is full. The driveway is full with 2 service vehicles and a personal vehicle. Next slide. Go back. There we go. This is the 3rd truck that had to park out on the street because the driveway was full and blocks it. How am I doing?
You're at 5 minutes, sir.
Okay.
Still not-
Let's do the last 2 slides and we'll go. This is ruts in the road because people had to drive off because the driveway was full. This is a blind drive. If you drive down the street, there's a curve and you can't see ahead. Next slide. This is a view in front of 348 Overlook at night. We have no street lights. This is the view in front of 348 Overlook looking down the street on Overlook Drive. Because we don't have any street lights. I've almost hit people myself, and I'm very conscientious, and I've almost hit runners at night. This is our enemy. We hope that you turn down this proposal.
Thank you. In opposition, please? And if you could, sir, if you haven't signed in. I will. Okay.
My name is Drew Kasani, and I live at 363 Overlook Drive with my wife Mary and 2 cats. So we don't have big families down there. Last December hearing, the neighbors expressed many good, cognizant reasons speaking against this petition. Today, Alan focused on the safety, and you heard letters focus on the safety. I'd like to spend my time looking at the staff report and commenting on some of the things that they raised at that point. I have 5 major points to bring up. One is the traffic generation. You've already heard a lot about that. The number of guests in the petition, parking, noise production, and hours of operation. Quoting from the report, it says the traffic generated due to this use would be no different than other homes and uses in the neighborhood because the house will be rented at any given time to a maximum number of 6 guests. You've already heard how this traffic would be generated. It's a big problem. I'm not going to go into that, but I think it should be obvious that 6 renters coming into this neighborhood for a short period of time are going to create traffic generation much different than what is usual. The next point I want to make is the number of guests. How can a house with 6 transient renters is very different from what is in the neighborhood right now. We may have a family with 6 people, but those are embedded in the neighborhood, and the use of their home is certainly not the same as 6 probably adults coming in for a sporting event, which the petitioner said that that's what they wanted. Parking is a concern. You've heard that. I want to say that there's no way that you can get more than 5 cars into that lot. That's a very deceptive picture from the way it's taken. We can have 2 cars in front of the garage, 2 cars in the garage, and maybe 1 where the road narrows down to come onto the street. Now, if you're going to have 6 or 10 people in that parking lot, they're not going to make it. So if the cars are there, where do you think they're going to go? They're going to park on the street. Now, the other thing that gets me is the report says 10 spaces is ample parking for their use. What kind of a use are you talking about where you need 10 spaces? It must be people that are interested in having a lot of visitors or guests over there. My 4th point is noise production. Paragraph 4C implies house rules will prevent parties from making noise. How? Noise sensors and doorbell may monitor noise, but they cannot prevent noise nor enforce the rules. There's no way to enforce house rules, and even last month when we were here, there was some discussion about house rules can be changed at will of the owner. And so what we're saying is if the owner can change it, and the other thing that was said there, I forgot, is that when the house is sold, those rules go with the house. And so if a new owner comes in and wants to have these rules, the house rules changed, he can do it. and that means the CSG may want to have a good neighborhood, but the people following them or something like that would change it. And we have no guarantee that we won't have a Airbnb come in there whose sole purpose is to rent out to games at that time. And one more point about the noise. It says noise associated with families renting in this house for a short term in a residential neighborhood would be similar to other properties in the area. Well, the only noise I have ever heard, and I'm there, is on Halloween. We have a parade. And that parade is the weekend before Halloween, and all the kids get with their parents and walk around, and then they show a movie afterwards. Now, a movie with kids is very different than a house rented to a party of 6 would have expecting 10 visitors. So I think it's very different. The other point is the hours of operation. This report says the house will be operating 24/7. And I guess that means that no one else is going to be in it but renters. But when you have a house that's operating 24/7 that's a rental property, even Colin last week says the maximum 50% of the time, that's low for Airbnb. So I'm saying if it's 50% of the time, that means 180 days this property will be vacant. And so I'm saying that when the property has people in it, it's a problem for us. When it's unoccupied, it's a problem for us. So that's, I thank you for your time, and I hope that you vote against this proposal.
Thank you. Speaking in opposition.
Hi, Pat Morrissey, 368 Overlook Drive, and good news, I'm the last planned speaker, so we're putting this to an end. In the 1980s, I served on the West Lafayette City Council for 2 terms. During this 8-year period, we invariably denied nonconforming special exception requests, as we knew it was our responsibility to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods. Ravenemy is an R1 zone residential subdivision. R1 zoning guidelines allow single-family rental properties, but limit those properties to 3 unrelated parties. The petitioner is requesting a special exception for up to a maximum of 6 guests, which in reality, in many cases, could be 6 unrelated individuals, twice what R1 guidelines allow. Zoning laws are in place to maintain consistency within our neighborhoods, and the subject request goes well beyond existing R1 guidelines. On a personal note, I recently retired after 45 years as a commercial real estate lender. I fully support real estate investors and their projects, but I strongly feel that these projects need to be in properly zoned districts. By denying this request, the petitioner's investment is still protected as a single-family rental property, and our neighborhood won't have a miniature hotel in its backyard. In the staff report concerning this request, the APC Executive Committee stated, and I quote, that granting this request would not substantially adversely affect the comprehensive plan. But what it doesn't address is that an Airbnb strongly adversely affects our 48-house neighborhood. I'm also concerned about the precedents this special exception would set in falsely identifying Ravenemy as an Airbnb-friendly subdivision, which is not the case. Obviously, our neighborhood is unified in our opposition to this request. You've seen our petition, you've read our letters, and you've heard our comments. Please hear our voices as you determine your vote, and I ask that you deny the special exception request. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? You have a chance to rebut.
Thank you. I have a couple notes. I won't address all the concerns due to time, since a lot of them were addressed in my original statement. But for the parking, all of you should have a copy of the survey in your packet, which shows the length of the driveway, which you can infer how many cars that can actually hold. I would say for this, picture says 1,000 words. And just in general, I know some of the neighbors want this request to be denied, but I think it's important for the neighbors to understand the effects if we were to be denied tonight. My wife and I will own this home for a long time, and then we'll pass it down to our son, our newborn son. This home will be in our family for forever. And we would really like to use it for our personal use, but if we cannot use this home as a short-term rental and use it ourselves, we would rent it as a long-term rental, whether that be as short as 30 days or as long as a year. I apologize if this was not clear in the first meeting. Again, if we are denied tonight, we will still make this a rental, and with that being the potential to rent as a minimum of 30 days. And then if we were denied, we would have no engineering controls like we would have with a short-term rental. There will be no noise monitoring, no occupancy monitoring, no restrictions on pets or parties, no restrictions on parking or lawn service, or no lawn service. If we were denied tonight, we could still rent this house out to say college students, say a group in a fraternity who could throw parties all the time, park in the street, etc. The long-term tenants have no incentive to be courteous to the neighborhood, and there will be nothing we can do about it once the lease is signed. With a short-term rental, the guest has an incentive to follow the rules we put in place, because if they don't, then we can review them poorly and they will no longer be able to use the Airbnb platform. Also, if they're not following our policies, we can ask them to leave, whereas a long-term rental, we cannot. We will have much more control and cooperation with a short-term rental because the guests are incentivized to do so. In addition, short-term rentals average 50% occupancy or less, where if we go the long-term rental route, we'll be occupied 100% of the time. The neighbors may not agree, but a short-term rental with engineering controls and policies will be much better for the neighbors than a 30-day to 1-year rental where we will have no control. Before I end, there was one comment about changing the rules. We would be open to a commitment to not change the rules. Thank you again for your time. Thanks, Amanda and the APC, for recommending approval.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the board? I guess Colin, you said something about a possible commitment to rules. How do we know what those, would you have to file those rules with the Area Plan Commission then, I would assume, if we were to?
Correct. So that would be the max occupancy of 6. Really all the initial documents that were required to file the petition. So we'd always have noise monitoring, all of our engineering controls would be placed, no parties, and et cetera. We would agree to not change. We put those rules out there because that's what we want. We want our house to stay in good condition. We want to be respectful to our neighbors. We're not going to, after this meeting, go and change the rules and say, all right, you can party all the time. We don't want that either. So we would be open to commitment to not change our rules.
And I'm assuming also, either Eric or staff, that if there was a commitment to have a set of rules, that if they were to sell the house, that the next owner would have to abide by those rules as well.
That is correct. And I have a copy of those house rules here if you wanted to see them.
Sure, if you'd like to pass it around. Michelle?
Yeah, I had a question for you. My understanding, your intent is to use this on game days and game weekends primarily, right? So
Correct.
most of your renters will be non-game times, is that right?
I would assume our target
That's fine.
audience would be parents visiting their kids at Purdue,
Yeah.
would be my best guess.
But not game day traffic, because that's your use of it.
I was
Gary?
just going to comment, I think the neighborhood made a good presentation on their concerns, but the petitioner also makes a good point, and we've heard this before on other transient guest houses where they can rent the house for 30 days, and there's really no controls. And sometimes if you get a bad tenant for a year or 2 years, it's pretty tough to move those on, and it's pretty hard for the owner, the landlord, to deal with those if they're abiding by the local ordinances and laws. They can still be annoying. So even though it may sound scary, you actually have more protection with a special exception, because they can lose their special exception if they don't follow those, and then would revert back to a traditional rental. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Gary.
Reading them.
Any other questions from the board? I'm going to wait till... We can take a look at the house rules real quick.
While they're looking at that, Steve, the other comment I would make is that if you're in the city of West Lafayette, you do not need a special exception currently for a transient guest house. They just operate under their own rental program. Lafayette needs a special exception, county needs a special exception, West Lafayette does not.
And that actually just changed.
Is it
Yeah.
coming through where they're going to adopt?
That is
the-
correct.
They're gonna adapt.
Okay.
It's actually changed based on prior recommendations, and the council accepted that. So it is
Okay.
now going to be the same as everybody else when it comes to special exceptions.
And I'm assuming they're doing that because they feel like they have more protection.
I think that is
Yeah.
correct.
That's the point.
I was curious if anyone wanted to entertain a motion or not for adopting the house rules as a condition? Or would you?
Just a slight correction, it would need to be adopted as a commitment.
It would be a commitment,
Thank you.
yeah.
And it was a commitment not to have the owner be able to change the house rules at will.
Well, it essentially would adopt those house rules that are listed.
And they cannot be changed at will of the owner.
That is,
That's
you
correct.
are correct, because then they become part of the approval and a commitment that is enforceable, like any other of the rules that apply.
Second motion.
Second?
So you made a motion
Motion?
and a second. Any discussion on, so essentially it puts in place that there
Well,
can't be
I
parties.
think Eric's going to say it. If we
Okay,
would,
Eric.
somebody would read those,
Okay, yeah.
whether
Let's go
Eric
ahead
reads
and-
them or somebody, so we have
That
them.
way we have the
We can hear them,
audience.
yeah.
Do you like to do that, Ed? Do you have it in front of you, just house rules?
Okay, just read the whole thing.
Just the house rules on the
Okay.
right side.
Strictly no parties, no pets, no smoking. Report any and all damage, and please be courteous and respectful of our neighbors. Quiet after 10 p.m., and please treat our home like you would your own. And then checkout time is 10 a.m., and put all dishes in the dishwasher. It's to clean up, and set the heat, or the cool to 75 and 65 heat. Confirm windows and doors are shut. Take out the trash. That's it.
Are those actually on the house
Yeah,
rules? Or
well,
are those
that's
on the bottom? That's the
checkout.
checkout.
Yeah.
That's the
All right.
checkout portion, not the house rules portion.
Okay.
Any discussion on, it's the first part of that list, not the checkout time and below.
Why don't you just read them for clarification,
Yeah.
Steve? If you got them right,
Okay,
somebody
yeah,
read
I
the
can-
ones you're talking about.
Okay. It says house rules, and it does say a friendly reminder, but it says strictly no parties, no pets, no smoking, report any and all damage. Please be courteous and respectful of our neighbors, quiet after 10 p.m. Please treat our home like you would your own. Enjoy. So those are the house rules.
Yeah, so I guess just for clarification, for the commitment, we're saying we would not change those rules.
You can't change the commitment.
I was just clarifying, that's what I said
Okay,
initially.
right. So maybe he was
I mean,
confused.
I would think
Commitment.
that they could add additional rules, but these they could not change. So they, as far as the parties and pets. We have a motion and a second for that. Do we have any further discussion? on that motion to make that a commitment? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So the House rules are now a commitment on the petition. I would ask staff, because we're done with the public hearing, I mean, is it a question or?
It's a question.
Okay, you can make it quick.
Who enforces the House rules?
The House rules? Or go
Yeah,
ahead, Eric.
all the rules that we're talking about, including the ones you just heard, are now, if it passes, are now part of the actual petition, and any breach of that would be enforced by the county, and they can have their entire special exception withdrawn for a violation of any rules, including the ones that you just heard.
Any other comments or questions? If not, we've got a ballot.
All right, there have been 6 ballots cast, 5 in favor of granting the special exception, and 1 to deny the special exception.
The special exception has been granted, and we'll hear the next case, please.
That is so wrong.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2091.
So wrong.
Hope you live next door to
Yeah.
Hope you live next door to one.
Please
So wrong.
exit. You guys are out of order.
So wrong. It's a shame of you guys. I hope your grandparents lived in next to an Airbnb.
You want to go ahead, Gary?
I'm ready, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank
I
you.
move to hear and vote on BZA 2091, Amber E. King. Petitioner is requesting a special exception to allow an agricultural rental hall operating between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., Sunday through Thursday, and 8 a.m. to midnight, Friday and Saturday. The 10-acre site is located on the south side of County Road 700 South, 1/2 mile east of County Road 700 West, specifically 6537 West, 700 South. That's in Wayne Township, Section 31, Northwest 22-5, with conditions and commitments. That was also continued from the December 2022 hearing at petitioner's request. First continuance.
Have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second, and staff, please, Mr. Riddle.
Thank you. This is a request for a special exception to allow for an agricultural rental hall on property near the unincorporated town of West Point. You can see on the map there, this is southwest of the intersection of 700 South and 625 West. The property itself is 10 acres, but it's been carved with the legal description to exclude the portion of the property that is zoned floodplain, because you can't do any of this in the floodplain anyway. So the area you see there with the perimeter in yellow is the subject area. And it is improved with a house, single-family dwelling, a smaller barn up here, and then a larger barn more recently completed in the back on the south here. This is the structure that would be the agricultural rental hall. It is currently zoned AW, agricultural wooded, and again, the request is for a special exception for an agricultural rental hall. Here is the petitioner's site plan. So now we're on just looking at the very south end of the site. This is the existing barn that would be used for the hall. This is the parking area that would be developed. These are two changing rooms, but they would actually be built to look like grain bins to kind of match the area. Here's a larger look. 4 different rooms, none of which could hold more than 100 people individually. And then to the east, the 2 changing rooms, camouflaged to look like grain bins. Here's some photographs. So this is 700 South, here looking east. This is the driveway leading into the property. Here looking west, and this is the driveway leading into the property. And then this is looking down that driveway at the barn at the rear of the property that would be used as the rental hall. And there's a closer look. Petitioner has volunteered a plan of operation that essentially codifies the usual requests that we make for agricultural rental halls seeking special exception, and that would be specifically operating hours, closing down at 10 p.m. on weeknights, closing down at midnight on Friday and Saturday. There would also be a prohibition on outdoor amplified music, and there would be a cap on the maximum number of attendees at 200, which is 100 less than the 300 that would typically be involved with a request like this. There are some surrounding properties. To the south, you have agricultural land. You have a dwelling right here, which would be about 800 feet from the party barn, and you have a dwelling here and here, both of which are between 750 and 900 feet from the party barn. That's the degree of separation. A mitigating factor here is that there is a berm along the street to the north, and then a pretty heavy tree line. You also have pretty heavy tree line across the street because this is a naturally forested area, and again, a pretty heavy tree line on the east side of this property and the west side of the adjoining property. As we think that it meets the findings for a special exception, staff is supportive of this request, subject to, again, the conditions that they volunteered, specifically the prohibition on 200 maximum attendees at any given time, operating hours, and the prohibition on amplified outdoor music. and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Petitioner, his or her representative.
Thank you. Good evening. Chris Shumwin of Gutwein Law, 250 Main Street. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm here on behalf of petitioner Amber King, a resident of the property. As you can see, and we thank the staff for their thorough review and assistance in developing this site. It's essentially a picturesque rural Tippecanoe County setting with a pond located behind their residence. Ms. King wants to participate in the agricultural rental hall, which has become a very popular thing throughout the community. But I will say that the ones that have been developed in Tippecanoe County, there's been several, but it's the ones that are developed specifically for this purpose and the ones that go about doing it the right way from the beginning, which is the ones that really do add value to the community and don't have any of the problems. The petitioners are presenting a proposed use that is consistent with all of the conditions and commitments of a well-functioning operation. I think it's important to note that first and foremost, the petitioners live on site. They're going to be present. This is their home. So they'll know what's going on and they'll operate it accordingly. In addition, it's a 10-acre site, which provides a lot of buffering, as Mr. Hiddle pointed out. The parking available is more than what is just listed as overflow parking. They own the land to the north, closer to the road as well. In addition, the petitioners will be limiting the hours of operation. There'll be no amplified music. They'll require licensed bartenders. All of those key details are what make the operation compatible with the area. Ultimately, we'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you have, but we respectfully request approval of this limited agricultural rental hall use.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Anyone in opposition? Or in favor of?
Two in favor.
Two in favor?
This
Okay.
is petitioner first.
Okay.
I'll be brief.
No problem.
So,
You're fine.
good evening. My name is Amber King, and I own and live at the property at 6537 West 700 South in West Point. I've been a resident of Tippecanoe County my entire life and part of the West Point community for the past 13 years. I want to see our county continue to thrive. I would love the opportunity, alongside my family, to build a business, share our beautiful property, and provide a much-needed service to our community. Jeremy and I, alongside our grown children, will own and operate the business on our family property. I hope to create memorable experiences for our future customers. In addition, I am committed to running a successful business, following all the rules and guidelines. I appreciate the consideration to make this dream a reality for my family for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking in favor?
I am Carl Martin. I own the property just to the north of it at 6614 West 700 South. We've been there for going on 8 years now. They're great neighbors. They are very respectful to everything that we do. We don't ever hear any noise coming from over there. They basically are friends with everybody that is around that area, and we don't see any reason why this shouldn't be given to them. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the petition? In opposition to the petition?
Mr. Clevenger, there is one letter of remonstrance we could read into the record.
Okay. If you'd like to go ahead and read that, please.
Okay. To Area Board of Zoning Appeals, January 19th, 2023. I own 87.5 acres adjacent to this parcel. My property has been in my family for 200 years. The agricultural zoning in this area and subsequent housing development around it reflects the desire for peace and solitude and not for loud music, more traffic, and more congestion of people. The proposed ag rental hall is permitted in zone general business by right, but petitioner purchased land zoned FP, floodplain, and AW, agricultural wooded. The changes you want will cause a destruction of nature's habitat. 1, noise. Putting loud, booming music into an uninsulated barn does not muffle the booming sound that carries a long way. Requiring doors to be shut would at least help, but not solve the problem. Shut down music by 10:30 p.m. as in other agricultural rental halls, ? Buffers along west and south borders. Tall perimeter fences along these borders may be required later for the abatement of trespassing noise and trash. The wooded area of my property is leased to hunters, which is allowed under the AW zoning. Hunting is good there and has been done for years, but the noise of this project, not allowed under AW zoning, will chase away all the animals and end the hunting, and therefore part of my allowed income under AW zoning from the hunter leases. Number 2, drunk driving. Number 3, what specific types of activities will be allowed? ? Weddings only as per Jeremy Chaffee? ? Events by private invitation only? ? Open to public, limited to 4 per year? 200 or 300 people? ? Number 4, trash. Glass bottles on the farm field can ruin the crop with glass splinters and contaminate the soil with glass splinters, which can never be separated out of the crop or the soil. Number 5, water drainage from all the flat surfaces, i.e. gravel lots and much more, roof structures. Tiles, ? Erosion, ? By Terry Butkovich of Fort Collins, Colorado.
Thank you. Since we have no one in opposition, would you like to rebut, Mr. Shulman?
Very briefly, the petitioners have a good relationship with the tenant farmer. They help them, they mend the fences that exist there. There's no anticipated, issues, and ultimately, as you know, drainage issues will be resolved by the drainage board. There will be very little additional surfaces that will create any additional drainage, and there just won't be any issues related to that. And we do not believe that it'll impact the remonstrator in Fort Collins. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the board? Robert.
I have a question. Unless I missed it, it didn't seem like they addressed outdoor lighting, and that's one of the items that is brought up on our ballot. Is there any plans? I would kind of like to know before approving if, are there going to be outdoor lighting, and really, if so, how much outdoor lighting, so that could come into...
The only outdoor lighting is noted on the plans, and it'll be on building, and there'll be wall packs that are hooded and shielded to be right down on the walkways on the outside of the building. So there won't be anything that will leave the site, and it's just all noted on the plans of being near the accessible parking spaces. And that's the only exterior lighting. And then also by the parking lot on the south side. So all the lighting is located on the back of the property to the west and south, away from any of the residents, which are behind the pine trees and the woods. But you can see, it's a little blurry, but you see the arrow pointing to the western wall of the building. That's noting the location of a light, as well as on the south side, right in the middle of the building between the two doors. And they're hooded wall pack lights on the side of the building.
I'm assuming it's actually clearer on the actual plans. Does that answer your question? I believe the outdoor lighting has to be specified on the plans that they submitted.
Oh, and I did misspeak. There's one more on the south side of the property it's located on the building as well. The service kitchen area, right there, that line as well.
That definitely answers the question. If this is approved, are they anyway limited to, if they want to add more lighting or?
Yeah, they're limited to the petition's request on the lighting issues, anything that would be outdoors and visible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, we've got a ballot.
That's a foul.
What are the new parental hall requirements?
What's up?
What are these? And we'll meet the new parental hall requirements.
They are going to have some new ones, like it's got to be 1,000 feet away. So they're going to kind of tighten it down. They're going to have,
Who's they?
automatically, us, yeah, but APC will change the ordinance. So it'll be 1,000 feet, so like that. This one will be just off by that much. And they can always allow it still. And then,
So we'll have tighter requirements, even
it'd
maybe
be tougher
this far.
requirements. And there's also the automatic requirement that there's no outdoor amplified music. Right here, the commitments. Six ballots, all in favor of the special exception.
Special exception has been granted, and we'll hear our next agenda item, please.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2093 JHS Investment Group LLC, care of Ripam Singh. Petitioners requesting the following setback variances for a proposed addition to an existing structure in an MB zone. Looks like number one has been withdrawn. Number two, to reduce the side setback from the minimum required 10 feet to 4.3 feet. That's UZO 2-12-8. Site is located on the southwest corner of Old 231 and County Road 500 South, commonly known as 5011 Old US 231 South, Wheel Township, Section 20, Northwest, 22-4.
I second.
Motion and a second, and we'll hear from staff, please. Amanda?
Thank you. So yes, just a brief explanation here. The petitioner originally applied for two variances for a side setback and a rear setback, but upon further review, it was determined that they only needed the one side setback. So that is what we are discussing this evening. We're talking about the south property line. It is a side setback. So this site is, as was stated, on the corner of Old 231 and 500 South. It is a lone NB, neighborhood business zoned property, has been for quite a while. There's a lot of single-family residences on the east side, agricultural on the south here, and GB up here, but as you can see, it is still in row crops. The aerial there. Closer up, the site currently has a business building on it that is not in use. It used to be a pizza shop. Before that, a water treatment solutions company, like a Culligan Man type of place. It has been there since about 1970, and it was built close to that southern setback. It's 4.3 feet from the property line. It has existed as such since that time. The petitioner is proposing to add on to this building. It's kind of a squash T shape. They're just going to box it out here on the north side and on the south side here. And it's because of this south side where the setback, the property is, the building, sorry, is encroaching into that setback. That's why they are requesting this variance, to bring it into conformity. Here is the site plan. The additions on this site plan are shown for the purposes of the site plan, just a little bit out from the building. It is not going to be built that way. To give you an idea of what the building looks like currently. And this is the property line on the south that we are talking about here. I apologize, I don't have a picture from the other side of the building. I think that's it. It is, the staff understands from a practical standpoint why the petitioner wishes to add on to the building. However, it is up to us to determine if there is a hardship, unusual hardship from the UZO. So our findings, the APC determined that it is not a use variance, and it is staff's opinion that this variance will not be injurious to the public health, safety, and general welfare of the community. The existing building has been there since 1970. It will not, use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. It will not affect the neighboring property owner any further, nor will it affect their ability to use that dwelling as a single-family residence. Terms of the zoning ordinance are being applied to a situation that is common to other properties. There is nothing unusual about the shape, topography, or size of this lot. Strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will not result in an unusual or unnecessary hardship, as defined in the zoning ordinance. Hardship involved is self-imposed and solely based on a perceived reduction of or restriction on economic gain. An expansion could be added to the building that meets the setback requirements that materially would be similar to the addition that is proposed by the petitioner. Variance sought does not provide only the minimum relief because there is no relief for no hardship. So we are recommending denial, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner, his or her representative.
If I can approach, I've got a handout.
Okay.
Thank you.
The missing view, right? I said the missing view.
Thank you. Good evening, Kevin Riley, attorney with Riley & Teeter & Schreier, 250 Main Street, representing the petitioner and property owner, JHS Investments. This is the building that formerly housed the Dock 231 restaurant for a few years. It's currently vacant, and the owner wishes to repurpose this, or repurpose the use of this building by putting a convenience store in. All we are looking to do is to create an addition to this building that squares off the building. The picture you have is from the south, so it looks at the south property line, and all we're going to do is fill in that notch. So we're not actually increasing the encroachment on the neighboring property. We just want to square off the building, and we're going to do the same thing at the front notch as well. And one of the reasons that you would do that with the retail space is that way you have sight lines, direct sight lines to the entire interior of the building. As Amanda mentioned, this is going to cure an existing nonconformity on that south property line. We agree it's not a use variance. We agree that it's not injurious to the health, safety, or welfare of the community. And we agree that it's not going to have an adverse impact on the adjacent properties.
We don't agree, though, with the other conclusions that area plan had to begin with, or, excuse me, staff had. We do believe that the terms of the ordinance are being applied to a situation that is not common to other properties. We've got a property that has, it's an existing nonconformity that's been around since the 70s. That's not necessarily common to this area. So in that respect, we don't think that this is a common situation. The strict application of the terms of the ordinance, we believe, will result in an unusual and unnecessary hardship. Staff has indicated that we could just build something materially similar to the west. We don't see it as materially similar, first of all, in look, but more importantly, if we were to build to the west, that western wall is a load-bearing wall, and as a result, we would have to do some significant either reconstruction or replacement of the roof if we were to build west as opposed to just fill in that small south corner. The hardship is not self-imposed. It's an existing building with an existing nonconformity. We're just trying to cure that nonconformity, and we are asking for the minimum relief. We're not looking to encroach any further on the neighbor. We just want to square up with where the property or the building already is situated, and it's been there since the 70s. So we think it's an appropriate request, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and we request your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? In opposition? Questions, comments from the board?
I have some questions. I think I might have missed this. What is the neighbor on the south, that property, that tree line? What is it? Is it a home?
Yeah, there's a single-family home to the south.
Okay. And if you hypothetically did do what the staff suggested and expanded west, the existing wall would still be non-conforming, right?
Right.
So that would still be an issue regardless of whether you
Right.
filled in the notch or not. So it's not like they're gonna, okay, just wanted to make sure that was
Well, and
what I was
then the
seeing.
farther west we go, the more it blocks the view of the single-family home to the south. They're viewed kind of to the northwest.
Oh, right.
So.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we've got a ballot.
All 6 ballots in favor of granting the variance.
Variance has been granted, and we'll hear the next case, please.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2094, Williams Ruiz Ramirez and Amanda Ruiz. Petitioners are requesting a special exception to allow a general contracting business in an AA zone operating 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Saturday, at 2623 North, 925 West, Shelby Township, Section 10 Northeast, 23-6, with condition, and I hope I got those names correct.
A second.
Motion and a second. We'll hear from staff. Mr. Heddle.
Thank you. This is a request for a special exception to allow for a contractor, specifically a concrete finishing contractor, to be located on property zoned AA. This is the far west side of the county on 925 West, and the site in all is 3.5 acres. AA is the select agricultural zoning designation, although the property is not used for agricultural purposes. On the site, you have here the house that the petitioner lives in, and you have here the barn from which he is currently operating the concrete finishing business. There was a complaint from a neighbor about this site and this site down here, which is also operating in AA as a contractor. Both sites were given violation notices maybe 4 or 5 months ago. This petitioner has called in and has agreed to clean up the property, and he's on the clock to get that done right now. I'm sorry, this property owner, not petitioner. And then this petitioner, Mr. Ruiz, and his wife are here today to file the special exception, which is the corrective action that they have chosen to resolve the violation. Again, that's the property. Here is Mr. Ruiz's site plan. That's the house that he and his family live in. This is the pole barn from which they run the business. And then he is proposing a storage area inside of which would park, his employees would park, and they would keep a handful of materials and a storage bin back here. Notably, they don't do any mixing or storage of raw concrete materials on the site. They meet the trucks out at job sites. So what's going on during the day is really the parking of the cars of his employees in this area. Previously, they had parked them in front. Our suggestion was that they do a dedicated parking area in the back just to keep the appearance of the generally agricultural appearance of the area. Some photos. This is looking north along 925 West. This is the property in question, and that's the pole barn. This is looking south along the same street. That's the pole barn. That's looking into the property from 925 West. Again, the barn from which he runs his business. And those are some employee vehicles in the background. And this is the storage area. We are suggesting that they obscure, the trappings of the business, if you will, by use of an opaque fence, a privacy fence, or a berm, or some other obscuring device, technique, which can be arrived at with the administrator. Here you see the cars that are parked. That's a shipping container that's kind of permanently parked there, and then the materials, all of which would pretty easily be obscured. It's relatively remote. The nearest neighboring dwelling is across the street. We haven't heard from this person. And then there's dwellings scattered to the north and dwellings scattered to the south. Another shot of the barn, and then this is Mr. Ruiz's house. Interestingly, this would be eligible for what we call a rural home occupation, which is where you can run a business by right from your house. There's two different kinds. There's just a regular home occupation, which allows for hobbyist and craft activities, massage therapist, hair salon, one-chair hair salon, various things you can do from your home no matter what it's zoned. And then there's rural home occupations, which allow for different kinds of businesses in rural settings, up to and including things like contractors. But there's a clause that says you can have no more than one employee that lives off-site, and Mr. Ruiz has a number of employees that come and park. So he's not eligible for that, hence the need for the special exception. We're comfortable with the request, provided there be the condition, or rather, we don't even need the condition, we just need the site plan, part of the approval that shows a dedicated outdoor storage area and parking area, which again removes kind of the trappings from view of the road, which is the only place they really could be viewed from. So with that, we are supportive of this, given that dedicated outdoor storage area as shown on the site plan, and would be happy to answer any questions you might have. There is one remonstrance letter, which I can read whenever you'd like me to.
Let's go ahead and hear from the petitioner first.
Okay.
Hello, good evening. My name is Amanda Ruiz. I live at 2623 North, 925 West in West Lafayette. My husband and I own Ruiz Concrete. We are a family-owned business that contracts with multiple local builders to provide concrete finishing services for both residential and commercial properties. We have worked closely with the staff to ensure that if the special exception is approved, we will be in compliance with all requirements and commitments. Our desire is not now, nor has it ever been, to create any issues for our neighbors. Our desire is to continue to improve Tippecanoe County while providing a nice living for several local families, our employees. We moved our business operations to store equipment to this barn after multiple thefts of our property and equipment at our previous warehouse location. We did not seek to rezone for a special exception, as there are several other businesses that operate on our road without zoning. We did not build the new barn. It was a pre-existing barn that we just expanded and updated. Our original intent was just to have a place to store our toys, our kids' bikes, our mower, all of those kinds of things. They did mention that our hours are Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., which sounds concerning, but our hours are variable, as they are in most construction businesses. Sometimes we start at 6 and we're done by noon. Sometimes we start at 6 and we're not done until 9. But our aim is not to create any traffic issues on our road. So to that note, we do have no customers that come to the barn. It is only our employees, and our employees do carpool to the site so as to minimize traffic for our neighbors. We have requested that they do that. We are more than willing to work with the BZA and the APC, to calm any concerns and to collaboratively solve any issues that have arisen. Our goal, as I said, is to be in compliance with all zoning regulations. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? We'll go ahead and take the letter, please.
This is from Aaron Cobb, 2527 North 925 West, which is the property abutting this property to the south. Dear Tippecanoe County APC, this letter is in regard to BZA-2094, Williams Ruiz Ramirez and Amanda Ruiz. I would first like to state that Williams and I are friends, and I am glad that he is my neighbor. I currently have a neighbor to the south of me that is operating a diesel truck repair business with little to no regard to noise, hours of operation, and property upkeep. I know that Williams will have more respect for his neighbors. However, I do have some concerns with the special exception request. There is not a limitation on the number of employees, so traffic and noise could increase in the future. The hours of operation are well beyond the normal operating hours for most businesses, and there is no good way to monitor this. If Williams were to move in the future, the next property owner could abuse the special exception guidelines and become a nuisance like my neighbor to the south. Sincerely, Aaron Cobb.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Michelle Klein, and I'm the owner of the property to the east and to the north. And I'd say opposition might be a little bit of a strong word here, but I wanted to call out a few items that were listed in page 2. So I also, along with the letter that was just read, page 2 specifies that there are 5 employees that would be parking there. There's also, I believe, on page 3, it mentions 4 employees would be parking up, plus the petitioner. But it calls out that there is not a limit to a maximum. This is what's happening now. So I would like to request a limit to be put on that, if at all possible, for the number of cars that could be used and parked there. It also states that from a recommendation standpoint, that this petition is for the recommendation to get the official approvals. And if you look on the diagram, I wanted to, forgive me, I've never done this, so I don't know if this is acceptable, but if you'll notice where the diagram shows the cars parked to the back of the property, the drive to get into the property, yes, thank you for the clarification there. That's the drive to get back to where the parking would be. There's a statement in here that says that you must have a paved drive and 1 paved parking place. Does that specify for that drive? Is that?
We'll see if we can get answers for you in a minute.
Oh, okay, thank you. So my question there is to clarify that when all approval is made from the county standpoint, that it would be made from that drive and that area versus the home area. And then my final item is that for the property to the north and the east that we own, currently that is all farmland that's being farmed, along with some areas that can't be farmed, that's trees. But at some point, that could be residential property as well, but obviously isn't today. So thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Do you have a rebuttal? And if you can, answer our questions. If not, we'll see what we can find out.
Okay, great. I am glad to hear my neighbor's input on this. The first issue that's come up is that there's no limit on the number of employees that we would have. Like I said, our employees that we do have now currently carpool, and that would be something that we would continue to suggest. Also, we do not desire to grow to be this giant company. We like to know our employees, and we don't want to have 20, 30 guys. That's more than we could manage, let me say it this way, more than I'm willing to manage at this point. And about the hours of operation, as stated, they are variable. During the summertime, we are working very early in the morning until very late at night. During the winter time, it's more, maybe 5 hours during the day or something. The hours are much less. As far as what the future property owners might do there, I obviously have no control over that. I would hope that they would treat the property well, like we're attempting to. But again, that would be up to them. And absolutely, we agree that we could put up a 6-foot-tall opaque fence if that is what is required as a commitment for this to pass. We would do that so we could kind of mask all of our storage area there in the back. We do not currently have a paved parking space, but we could put a paved parking space right outside one of the doors with no problem. We do have to meet, as one of the other commitments that's on here, we do have to meet with the county highway department and other county departments before, I think, before I don't know how that works. We would have to meet with them. I know that. And then in terms on the limit on cars, I wouldn't have any problem with limiting the number of cars that could be parked back there, except I think that that's already part of
a zoning ordinance that it has to be one parking spot per 200 feet or something I saw. And sometimes we do host family gatherings at our house, and people park down at the barn. And so I wouldn't want to limit our family and friends from being able to park down at the barn, but we want to work with our neighbors and work with the board to come to the best conclusion for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. And just a clarification, it sounds like that paved parking spot is for an accessible spot, so it would probably be paved right up next to where the door is, so if somebody were to be in a wheelchair, they could get in and out of the barn. And the driveway, I think the driveway, does that have to be paved, or is it, it can be gravel, I believe, correct?
It can be gravel, but the condition is approval from the highway department, so they may require a heavier engineered entrance.
They may have to redo the entrance
They may.
and put concrete or pavement
It's up
at
to
the
the highway
entrance, depending on
department.
how, it's up to the highway department.
Yes.
I do have a couple of questions about it says approval with the following conditions with a timeline to be set by the board. I don't know if staff can, I mean, we didn't put this motion on the floor with conditions. I mean, are you wanting those conditions, and what is the timeline that we're supposed to set?
Steve,
Yes.
it's written in here, and if I didn't read it, I'll amend
Okay.
my motion to include with conditions, because it's on the motion.
Oh, it is on the motion, just not
Yeah.
on the agenda that way.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I don't know if I read it or not, but
You may have,
Okay.
you may have.
Thank
so
you.
it's- You probably did if you read it from,
I think the idea was because this was originally a violation, to assign a timeline for completion of, the outdoor fence, the outdoor storage and parking area, so that it's not completely open-ended. You might negotiate that
Okay.
with Amanda or Williams.
And that was added because usually with special exception conditions, it's a condition that must be met before they can gain an operational permit.
Correct.
They're
And
already
since
in
they're
operation, so
operation-
we felt that there was a need to place some kind of a time constraint on
You
this.
don't necessarily need to do it then. You can, but they're motivated to do it.
but they're motivated to do it so that they have the approvals and the license, and I'm assuming that if they don't do this, I mean, unless staff is wanting something for enforcement.
This special exception request is their chosen method to correct the violation, so
Correct.
they'll have to meet whatever conditions, commitments, terms come from this special exception approval if you decide to approve it. And that, if that includes a timeline, then they would have to complete that stuff by that time.
But they would not be operational until they complete those steps, correct?
Yeah, technically, as a matter of course, we don't tell, if someone's received a violation for an improper use, we don't tell them they have to shut it down while their variance or special exception is pending. I would say, because this is not a health and safety issue, because it's of limited nuisance to neighbors, that we don't tell them they have to shut down and wait until they get everything completed. They seem to be operating okay. But if there's a timeline, that...
Would that be 3 months? Would that be 6 months?
How
may
is
be
it-
up to
Do you have a
petitioner.
recommendation?
Could take a while to get a fence contractor out there these days,
Yeah.
I think maybe talk with the petitioners and see what might work that's reasonable.
Would you like to comment on that, please?
We would like to rectify it as soon as possible, of course. We kind of just want to make this right and then move on. But like was mentioned, getting a fence contractor out, I don't know how long that currently takes. So if it needs to be done in 3 months and then for some reason we go through a solid freeze in the next 2 months, it might be hard to put in a fence, a month later if the ground is still kind of frozen. So I'm not attempting to get around anything. I just want to make sure that we have adequate time to get someone out to put the fence in for us.
I'd move that they complete this within 6 months.
I was thinking.
You know, that
something
gets us
similar.
through the winter time.
Yeah. We have a second on that? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Is that agreeable to you to give you 6 months to
Yes,
get
absolutely.
everything in place?
Yes, sir.
And I'm assuming that the talks with the highway department and that would be handled fairly quickly, and then whatever it takes to get
The fence up.
the fence up and whatever needs to be done with the drive and pavement.
Yep, absolutely. We could get that done in 6 months, hopefully sooner.
Do we have any other comments on that? Because I'll take a vote on the 6 months as a condition for the timeline. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And Ed, did you have a comment? No? Okay. Hearing no other comments, we have a ballot.
Six ballots in favor of granting the special exception.
The special exception has been granted, and we'll hear our last case, please.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2095, Emily Sampson. Petitioner is requesting a special exception to allow a Haven home for Isaiah 117 house, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in an R1B district. The property is located in the Vandergraff addition at 2710 Bonnie Lane, Lafayette, Fairfield Township, Section 22, Northwest 23-4.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second, and we'll hear from staff. Amanda, please.
Thank you. So this last one here is for a Haven home, which was a recent addition to our ordinances last year. And I'll just read the definition very quickly. A Haven home is a social service facility assisting children awaiting foster care or similar placement. A child's stay at such facility shall not exceed 72 hours. So you can see from this image here that this is in an R1B zoned neighborhood. This is a very old platted subdivision in Lafayette. As the staff report says, houses here are modest in size but well cared for. The lot is currently unimproved, and it actually slopes up fairly steeply from Bonnie Lane. I believe I have a good picture of that here. So it is one of the highest points in the neighborhood. You can see the approach here along Bonnie Lane. It's at an intersection with, I forget the name of that street there. Here is the site plan. It's going to be a 2-bedroom home. Garage is not shown, but there is a large driveway area which would be more than sufficient to house the required 2 vehicles for this use. The site is served by city utilities. It would be open 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, according to the petition. The only vehicles on site would be 1 to 2 volunteer personal vehicles plus 1 Department of Child Services vehicle. Only typical residential lighting would serve this site. There would not be much noise aside from potentially children playing outside, which is normal for a neighborhood. When asked about the occupancy of the house, the petitioner responded, the house needs to be available 24/7, but there will be no permanent resident. Employees will be working there during business hours, and we will host children and caseworkers on an as-needed on-call basis, which could be any time of the day. When there are no children present, we may have volunteers in the house for organizing, maintenance, cooking, cleaning, or other household tasks. For the ballot items, the UZO does authorize the special exception for a Haven home in the R1B zoning district. Requirements and development standards for the requested use will be met. Setbacks, parking, etc. will all meet per the submitted site plan. It will not subvert the general purposes served by the ordinance. It won't harm the public and would serve a public need. Granting it will not materially and permanently injure other property or uses because of traffic generation. 2 or 3 cars parked on site occasionally would be no burden to the neighborhood and would be consistent with other single-family residences. Placement of outdoor lighting, only typical residential lighting is proposed. Noise production, none other than children playing. Hours of operation 24/7 is normal for this use. So staff is recommending approval, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner, is her representative?
Hello, my name is Emily Sampson, and I am a program coordinator for Isaiah 117 House, and I'd love to speak a little bit about the organization. So Isaiah 117 House is a nonprofit organization. It's a 501c3. It was founded in Tennessee in 2017 and has since expanded to over 40 locations in 9 different states. Our mission is to reduce trauma for children entering foster care, ease the burden on the Department of Child Services, and support placement families during that transition into foster care. When the Department of Child Services determines that a child must be removed from their unsafe home, there's a transition period before a safe family can be found for those children. Sometimes it's a few hours, sometimes it's a few days. During this time, children usually wait at the Department of Child Services office, which is just about a block away from here. These children often have nothing with them. They're lonely, they're scared, they're hungry, they're often in dirty clothing. Isaiah 117 House wants to provide a comforting home for these children to go. They'll be able to have a bubble bath, play in the fenced-in backyard. They'll be able to have a meal and take a nap if needed. The DCS caseworker will remain in the home with the child and be responsible for the children until a placement is found. We will have volunteers who are trained and certified and background checked that will surround these children with love and care for them and care for the caseworker as well during that time. Each child who comes through our red doors will receive new clothes, shoes, school supplies, whatever they need for their next journey in their foster family or in a relative placement. We will also be able to give whatever family, whatever they need, if they need car seats or beds or fire extinguishers, whatever is necessary for them to accept that child into their home. Isaiah chapter 1 verse 17 says to defend the cause of the fatherless, and we believe this is God's call for this ministry. There are currently 11 open Isaiah 117 houses in Indiana and in Tennessee, and there have been no issues with any unwanted people coming to the house or any increased police presence or emergency personnel. Our property was purchased late October of last year, and we started reaching out to neighbors. We have 11 neighbors, which was more than we thought we did. So we started reaching out to neighbors as soon as we could. We were able to have some wonderful conversations with neighbors. We want to be good neighbors, and we wanted to start that conversation early. And so we were able to hear some of their concerns about safety and address some of those concerns. So this is new in this area. However, we were able to provide all 11 neighbors with letters from neighbors of existing Isaiah 117 houses so that they had an idea of what other neighbors felt about being next door to an Isaiah 117 house. Let me see what else notes I made. It also, we also encourage neighbors to check out our website, which included virtual tours of Isaiah 117 houses so that they can see that it's just a home. But we know that it's more than just a home. It's changing the way that foster care begins for hundreds of kids every year in our region and protecting those children. So I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Anyone in opposition? Questions, comments, report?
Steve?
Yes.
Just for my clarification, how did this, do we have jurisdiction in this? Because this is the city of Lafayette, isn't it?
The area board has jurisdiction over all special exceptions. The Lafayette board only has jurisdiction over variances in the city of Lafayette.
Thank you.
Yep. We just talked about that at the area plan. We have a ballot.
6 ballots in favor of the special exception.
The special exception has been granted, and that was a lot less contentious than your last attempt. Okay. Unless any member has an objection, the chair will order the findings of each member casting a vote for the majority decision of the board to be the collective findings of the board in support of the decision of the board. Hearing none, it is so ordered. And administrative matters.
We have none.
I will take the last motion.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good meeting.
2 hours and 25 minutes.